Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning back in. I'm sitting down here in the basement bait shop, rigging a few rods for a Wednesday night derby. But as I look out the window, it is pouring rain and it's blowing like 30 mile an hour out. So I don't know that we're actually gonna have the little jackpot derby tonight, but it got me thinking about a good topic for our video for today. And that has to do with what are the best baits to fish when it's really windy out. Not all baits continue to perform at a high level when it's windy out. Some baits, the productivity goes down, not just because the bait doesn't work as well or the fish aren't in the same positions when it's windy, but because the angler can't fish the bait properly. If you can't present the bait in the correct manner, the productivity of that bait decreases because it's no longer functioning the way it should. So not all baits perform well in the wind. Some baits perform better in the wind. So those are the baits I want to talk about. So I've got 5 baits here that I think will help you catch more fish when it's really windy out. You may have to go away from some of those finesse tactics or weightless tactics and go to something that allows you to have better contact with your bait through your line. And that's really what it comes down to, guys. When it's windy out, the bigger the bow in your line, the less feeling you have, the more your bait is being pulled by the wind in probably what is the wrong direction or the wrong manner, and you're just not allowed to present it to where those fish are living, and that is why your productivity goes down. So in my opinion, what you're looking for is a bait that you have better contact with, that you can reel straight back to the boat, which allows you to have that tighter line, and one that will basically cut through the waves and the wind that's out there. And they're baits that you can fish in the wind, because a lot of times you want to use the wind to your advantage. Now granted, if it's like today and you've got a 30 mile an hour wind, you may not want to be fishing on the downwind side of a lake because you've got 4 or 5 foot waves rolling in. Might not be possible, but I'll tell you, you can find areas on whatever lake or river you're fishing and utilize that strong wind to your advantage. So you may not be in the strongest part of the wind and the biggest waves, but there'll be areas in that lake where the fish are setting up based on using the wind to their advantage so that they can feed more. So really, guys, that's what you're looking for. Once you find an area that you think has fish, you want to utilize a bait that will take advantage of the windy conditions. So I've got some baits here that I want to talk about. The first, and potentially the most successful and easiest to use, is a spinnerbait. Guys, pick up a spinnerbait, go find a windblown bank and fish it. You know, these are the same areas a lot of times where you might have fished a weightless wacky rig, and you can't fish that now because the wind's too strong. Pick up a spinnerbait, go down those same banks. You can cover water quickly. You can let the wind blow you down the banks at a fast pace because you can cover so much water, and it gets a ton of bites because the fish are utilizing the areas that the wind has pushed the shad into. You know, the wind is pushing the shad into little pockets, into little coves up on the bank, and there's not much better shad imitating bait than a spinnerbait. So I would check out a spinnerbait. The next is really similar to that. A chatterbait, guys. You can use this in the same areas that you're fishing the spinnerbait. It's a great bait that, you've always got tight pressure on the bait. It's one that draws fish to it. And again, similar to the spinnerbait, it creates a lot of commotion, a lot of vibration. So when you're in rougher conditions, the fish can track that better than they could a bait that doesn't have big movement in it. So a chatterbait, really similar to a spinnerbait. You get on the wind-blown banks, you're looking for fish that are feeding on shad that are put there by the wind. These two baits, chatterbait and a spinnerbait, absolutely phenomenal for fishing in the wind. The next is a jerkbait. This is a Megabass Vision 110, a great jerkbait. Whatever your favorite jerkbait is, you can throw it in the wind. Now it is a bait that when you work it down, you're not going to necessarily feel the bites as good on slack line because you've got the windy conditions, but because you're working it so erratically, that's okay. You're jerking it, you're not going to, when you pause it, you're not going to feel that bite, but when you go back to jerk it, the fish will be on there. Again, you're trying to capitalize on that that shad movement that's been pushed to whatever area of the lake that you're fishing. A jerkbait also seems to excel really well in windy conditions because you have that broken up surface. You know, a lot of times your jerkbait's not your best choice when you're fishing flat, calm conditions because of the fact that the fish can see that bait so well in those conditions. And a lot of times you're fishing a jerkbait in really clear water. So when you've got good windy conditions in clear water, the fish can see that jerkbait from a long ways away, but they don't get a good look at it because the surface is so broken up. Really a great bait for fishing in the wind, a great bait for covering water and finding those active fish as you're moving along. The next, dropped it. Your favorite lipless style crankbait. This is the Berkeley War Pig, quickly becoming my favorite lipless bait. Especially this color. This is chartreuse, sexier shad. A phenomenal color. I love this color pretty much everywhere I go. But the great thing about a war pig or whatever lipless bait you're throwing is how loud it is. Again, it's a simple bait to throw when you're fishing those windy conditions. You throw it out, you retrieve it back on a tight line, you work in a couple stops, a couple of jerks, but for the most part, it's a tight line retrieve, a straight retrieve back to the boat, and it's making a ton of noise. It's just the whole way back, you're hearing it rattle all the way back. That's drawing those fish to it. It's a great bait. It cuts through the water really well. And guys, a lipless to me is one of your top baits when you're fishing rough conditions and windy conditions. The last is if you really do want to stick to, say, fishing the bottom or trying to work those areas where you think the fish are holding. So maybe you're sitting out in the middle of the lake, fighting the wind, fishing brush piles, or just fishing a ledge, because sometimes that's what you got to do. In my opinion, then, what you want is a good heavy football head jig. You know, in this case, this is the Dirty Jigs tournament tour level skirted football jig. This is a great color. It's Okeechobee Craw, but you just grab yourself a heavy football jig, 3/4 ounce, a 1 ounce bait, and you can go out there, you can maintain your bottom contact so you know whether you're in the rock or you're on the shell bar or you've hit the, you know, the brush pile. You need something that's heavy enough to maintain bottom contact and that's not going to prevent a huge bow in your line. So a football jig is a great way to do that. And it's one of those baits that if you really need to stay out fishing, you know, in the wind and you want to be on the bottom, in my opinion, there's not much better to maintain contact with the bottom and still feel the fish bite than a football head jig. So guys, those are your baits. If you're fishing on a day like we've got today where we've got sustained 20 to 30 mile an hour winds and you need to get out there and fish because it's your only day off work or it's when the tournament is or for whatever reason, those are your baits that, in my opinion, will help you catch more fish when it's so windy. So guys, pick up a couple, head out to the lake. Hopefully it's not as windy as today, but if it is, utilize them to your advantage. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. More tips and tricks coming out every day.